School day is finally over and most of the students have left the campus, but that's when a young man named Akihito sees a cute girl in glasses standing at the edge of the rooftop. It wouldn't have taken a genius to figure out that she was ready to jump at any moment. Akihito quickly rushes to the rooftop to supposedly save her, but once there, the girl quickly rushes towards him and penetrates his heart through her saber. Any ordinary person would have died on the spot, but this man was immortal. And it isn't just him, the girl herself, Mirai Kuriyama, is the last surviving member of a certain clan of spirit world warriors. She repeatedly tries to kill him, but to no avail. It still does hurt though. One day after getting teased by a friend named Mitsuki, Akihito gets into a deep conversation with Mirai where she reveals the sad reality of what happened to her clan. They were all eliminated because of their strong blood manipulation abilities. Saying all this, she gets ready to take Akihito out, though much to their surprise, an actual youmu appears. They're in a pinch, but fortunately their teacher, named Shizuka Ninomiya, saves the day. She is also a spirit world warrior, but one that specializes in hand-to-hand combat. Later, Mirai finally comes out with why she has been so persistent in attacking Akihito. It's because she has never killed a youmu before, and since Akihito is an immortal half-youmu, she can get pretty good practice out of him. Though since the pain was getting a little unbearable, Akihito requests her that he'll treat her to dinner if she can stop her attacks for the day. So they go out to eat at a Mexican restaurant, but unfortunately for Akihito, her random attacks were going to continue tomorrow. In the morning, Mitsuki, his friend from before, tells him to avoid getting involved with Mirai, but Akihito ends up ignoring her warning and once again converses with Mirai after school. Only this time, she was concerned. A youmu is haunting her house and she doesn't know how to handle the situation herself. Akihito offers to lend her his help, so they both embark on the quest of taking out that youmu. First, they get it out of her home, and then Mirai engages in combat with the youmu. They're at the playground and Mirai is struggling a lot. Even when she almost strikes it dead, she's caught in a mental dilemma and ends up hesitating. She tries to take the easy way out by letting it go, but when Akihito reminds Mirai of her financial problems, Mirai finally finds her groove. She takes off her ring and consequently lets her true powers out. She restricts its movements by using acidic blood and then exterminates it by destroying its eye. They find an ultramarine stone at its core. The teacher had also found a stone when she defeated that other youmu. By this point, Mirai has wounds all over her body and is also quite exhausted. Akihito tries treating her and also asks if she would like to be part of their literary club, but Mirai rejects the sentiment before ultimately passing out. The following day, they go to the Shindo photo studio for stone appraisal and meet Ai Shindo. Mirai almost attacks Ai Shindo when she realizes that she is a youmu, but settles down after getting a short explanation on all these different natures of youmu. Ai Shindo is a humanoid cat youmu, and the owner of the studio, Ayaka Shindo, is a humanoid fox youmu. Shortly after, Mitsuki shows up in front of the studio and they all head to the school together with Ai Shindo. Mirai still doesn't want to join the literary club though. During school day, Akihito talks to Mitsuki's doting older brother, Hirumi Nase, about the increasing youmu attacks, but gets no straight answer, and later he goes to the studio all alone in order to inquire Ayaka about the content of a postcard sent by his mother, Yayoi Kanbara. Though you can probably imagine Akihito's embarrassment when he realizes how the postcard features his mother dressed in a catgirl costume. And to add fuel to the fire, both Mitsuki and Mirai also show up. After successfully embarrassing the living daylights out of her son, Yayoi explains that a youmu called Hollow Shadow is lurking in the shadows. It is dangerous and he should avoid any encounters with it. Ayaka adds on to this warning by revealing how Giva-level spirit warriors got wrecked by this youmu. Anyways, Ayaka then finally appraises that youmu stone they had acquired, but it turns out it's only worth a measly 1,000 yen. Quite a letdown considering how the one their teacher defeated turned out to be worth 26,000 yen. Still though, it's Mirai's first win as a spirit world warrior, and that warrants a celebration. So she treats Akihito to a beef bowl, but then suggests to Akihito that he'd rather stay away from her troubles. It may not look like it, but she has actually murdered someone in the past. Next morning, Mirai tries to take down a low-level youmu, but gets held back because of her own hesitance. Thankfully, Mitsuki appears at the scene and takes it out, hence in turn acquiring its stone. She wants Mirai to have it, but no, Mirai doesn't need her charity. While this goes on, the threat of Hollow Shadow starts getting more and more attention. Mitsuki and Hirumi's older sister, Izumi Nase, has a serious conversation with Moroku Fujima from the observation department. Now, Akihito still hasn't given up on getting Mirai to join the club, and he pesters her to at least pay them a visit. Later, Mitsuki asks Akihito to meet her at the train yard. Looks like she needs to talk about something serious. She mentions how Mirai is definitely planning on taking on the Hollow Shadow all by herself, and it's probably because of something that happened in the past. Akihito tries confronting Mirai about the story Mitsuki told him, and it was the truth. Mirai did indeed kill the daughter of the Yanami clan who had adopted her. She was a dear friend, and yet she ended up killing her just because she was afraid when her friend got possessed by that youmu. By this time, the hollow shadow has made its way to the Nagatsuki city, and the moonlit sky now emanates a purple glow. Akihito keeps trying to stop her, but she doesn't listen. And coincidentally, once Mirai is there, she comes across Sakura Inami, the sister of the girl she had killed. Sakura was driven by fear, and so she tried to cross blades with Mirai and end up getting sucked into Hollow Shadow's hallucinations. The fight is ultimately stopped by Akihito before things reach the point of no return. Both Akihito and Mirai narrowly escape Sakura, but the confrontation with the youmu isn't over yet. They're in the world of illusions created by the Shadow Youmu. When Mirai sees an image of Yui Inami, she's taken in, but fortunately Akihito snaps her back to reality before the hollow could kill her. This in turn reveals the Shadow's main body, and they together end up weakening it with corrosive blood. Mirai wonders about her own self-image and even asks Akihito about it, though while Akihito replies sincerely, the hollow shadow ends up possessing him. This creates a dire situation where Mirai has to stab that youmu out of Akihito. She hesitates but ultimately pulls through, and once it's out, Mirai finally kills it for good. However, the problem was Akihito. What was going to happen to him? Hirumi Nase, Ayaka Shindo, and their teacher Shizuku appear at the scene and lock up the now unstable Akihito. But when Akihito goes berserk, the trio couldn't manage to keep him confined any longer. In the end, they're knocked unconscious. However, Akihito's demonic outlash made Mirai tear up. She runs to him and hugs the rage out of his youmu. When he's finally conscious again, he sincerely apologizes for all the trouble he has caused, and Mirai starts crying once again. Though the next day, when they take the stone to get it appraised, it turns out to be worth only 200 yen. Of course, this makes no sense, especially after what they went through, but Akihito reassures her that Ayaka wouldn't lie about the value. Little did they know that the stone they had was replaced. The actual Hollow Shadow stone is presented to the head of the Nase family by Izume Nase. Its intention is to stall the spirit world warrior for the time being. After all of that happened, Mirai finally lets up and joins the literary club. And later, all four of the members, Akihito, Hirumi Nase, Mitsuki Nase, and Mirai, pay a visit to the Nase mansion. They run into that Moroku from the observation department. When they meet Izumi Nase, Mirai's Spirit World Warrior license gets suspended for a month after her careless behavior and trying to take on the Hollow Shadow herself, even after all the warnings. This does make her panic though, as she lost her source of income. Mitsuki helps in getting a part-time job, but while they were having a discussion at a pancake cafe about Akihito and what his relationship is with the Nase clan, they notice someone passed by a youmu just walking by. Mirai ends up killing it right before their teacher Shizuku arrived at the scene. She thanks them for taking care of the job for her and treats them to barbecue. Anyway, they later go to the place Mitsuki works at part-time, the Ayaka Photo Studio. Mirai is hired and even forced to photo shoot immediately. Following this, they talk about Akihito's psychological damage after that menacing transformation, and then they talk about going to the festival. Apparently, Mitsuki was always barred from attending festivals because of her responsibilities as a spirit world warrior, but after Mirai asking her, the two end up going to the festival where they come across Akihito and Hirumi. Looks like no one will be alone at the night of the festival. All of them have a great time. The following days, Mirai brings in bonsai trees whenever they're together at the literary club, and this is when Akihito realizes why she is always financially troubled. It's her gardening hobby. Eventually, Mirai gets her license back and immediately wants to take out a youmu so that she can pay the month's rent. She asks Ayaka if there's one around, and looks like there is. It's a fruit-type youmu worth 500,000 yen. And it's loitering around on their school's rooftop. Now Mirai instantly leaves to hunt for the youmu without hearing about its characteristics whatsoever. Akihito learns of the situation and quickly leaves to try and keep her from engaging in combat with that youmu, but they both end up falling into its defense trap. Later that evening, Shindo mentions how the youmu is quick to get distracted when girls are around, and so the duo tries to make Mitsuki help them out. Just like that, they have a go at it once again. Mirai shows her female appeal while Mitsuki comes in from behind. But this time, the youmu uses a disgusting pink liquid to restrict her. They tried, but failed, and just when they're about to call it a day, Hirumi enters the scene and explains how they should use a special soul to distract it, but Mirai's terrible singing does the opposite. Eventually, all of them are dirty because of the yomu's liquids, but they haven't given up on the youmu just yet. We get a short training arc where they spend a week practicing their dancing and singing, and so they're ready to take it on. Aishindo helps them out as well. When they perform, the youmu is amazed by the literary club's cute idol show and lowers its defenses. It was the perfect chance to kill it, if only they had decided on the job beforehand. With all of them performing, no one was free to kill the youmu, and it ended up self-destructing instead. Yet again, the gang got drenched in its liquids. As for Sakura Inami, she recalls the day when her sister Yui Inami called her weak and warned her about the Hollow Shadow's powers. But now it looks like Sakura is transferring to their school, and their teacher makes sure to inform the literary club. In the evening, Akihito helps Sakura recover after her fight with a youmu. When he's attending to her wounds, Sakura reveals a rather sinister yet important piece of information. She has been using a spear that continues to grow stronger by absorbing the youmu stones. An enigmatic individual gave it to her, and if she can kill Mirai, she'll have the honor of keeping the spear for herself. Unexpectedly, Mirai appears at Akihito's doorstep, and he instantly has to hide Sakura in his cabinet. Though when Mirai sees the extra pair of shoes, she pesters him around, and in the end, Sakura ends up revealing herself. She gives Mirai a death stare and leaves. The next morning, Sakura is now a student at their school. Later, both Mirai and Sakura confront each other right next to a nearby market. And it's during this fight that Mirai's resolve to live on, despite what happened in the past, truly shines. She knows that getting herself killed won't erase the regrets or the past, and so she must live on. Furthermore, a weak spirit world warrior like Sakura could never defeat Mirai. But that aside, the battle evolves into something else when Sakura's own weapon starts possessing her. Fortunately, Mirai saves her from that situation, and then they finally hear each other out. Sakura is hesitant, but they finally make up despite all that happened in the past. Both go home together. Consequently, that sketchy guy named Miroku Fujima picks up Sakura's weapon, somewhat disappointed that he couldn't get control over Sakura, but still quite optimistic because all the stones absorbed by the spear will help him get his actual goal, the Hollow Shadow Stone. Soon, night rolls around and there's tension in the air. Both Mitsuki and her older sister Izumi can practically feel it. It's a calm before a storm, or should I say, beyond the boundary. Sure enough, Akihito's mom sends him another embarrassing postcard, informing him about the calm and its effects. Ai and Ayaka further explain that the calm has weakened youmu, and now there's a chance that Akihito would no longer remain immortal as long as it lasts. That sketchy guy Miroku comes up and explains to Mitsuki how what she saw before with buildings getting mirrored is but a fraction of this youmu, beyond the boundary's true power. Hirumi comes in and attacks Miroku, but as always, the guy just flees the scene. As for Akihito, he and Izumi are on a train where he wakes up from a nightmare until getting put back to sleep by Izumi yet again. He is obviously feeling the effects of Beyond the Boundary. Ayaka starts taking care of him at her shop. Midnight rolls around and all spirit world warriors in the city start attacking whatever youmu they run into. Hirumi and Mitsuki contemplate about their family's conflict with the society, and Sakura asks Mirai to go back to Akihito's side. At the same time, Miroku tries to abduct Akihito, but Ayaka transforms into her youmu and attacks him. But it is Izumi who suddenly shows up and stops Miroku. Meanwhile, as Mirai is desperately on her way back to the studio, Akihito's half-youmu awakens. When she gets there, she's taken aback at the sight of Akihito in his youmu form. Izumi engages in combat with Miroku, but a random fireball diverts this attention, which allows him to quickly flee the scene, while both Hirumi and Mitsuki are taking on a giant youmu. Izumi then faces off against Akihito in hopes of trying to subdue him, but he ends up escaping as well. Now, after Hirumi and Mitsuki defeat the giant youmu, they meet up with Izumi and Mirai at Akihito's apartment. It is here that Mirai reveals how the calm has affected and weakened Akihito's half-human state more than the youmu state, and that has caused the youmu part to take over, or at least that's what Ayaka said. Following this explanation, they try to track Akihito, and quite interestingly, Izumi mentions to Mirai that she can now eliminate Akihito's youmu now that he is no longer immortal. This doesn't sit right with them. Mirai stays up all night stressed about the situation. Mitsuki is agitated and questions her sister's true intentions. While Hirumi braces herself and later confronts his sister, he expresses his suspicion that she has been manipulating Mirai to kill Akihito all this time. But Izumi instead warns Hirumi about what their society has been plotting against their family. Hirumi is unsure and wonders what's the real reason behind what's been going on. He investigates a little, puts two and two together, and ends up realizing that Akihito's other half is beyond the boundary itself. Meanwhile, that sketchy guy Miroku sneaks in and obtains the Hollow Shadow Stone from the Nace family vault. As for Mirai, she finally comes face to face with Akihito's youmu. It is a fierce battle until finally, with all her emotions breaking her heart, Mirai lands the decisive blow and ends it all. Still though, Akihito wakes up in his apartment and sees Mirai right beside him. Looks like she's been taking care of him all this time. Together, they go to the school and see both Mitsuki and Sakura in their swimsuits for some reason. At the club room, Akihito shares his appreciation to Mirai for taking care of him, but eventually Mirai reveals what actually happened during their battle, and how the actual reason she came to this city and to this school was so she could kill Beyond the Boundary. Still though, she just couldn't. She couldn't bring herself to kill him. Instead, she used her blood powers to somehow make herself the vassal of Beyond the Boundary, but ended up disappearing because of that. Akihito is obviously quite appalled, and when Mirai in this dream kisses him and bids him farewell, he finally wakes up to reality. As it turns out, 6 months ago, Mirai was tasked to take out Akihito's Beyond the Boundary by the Nase family head. So she came to this school, and even though Izumi told her not to get emotionally attached, she eventually came to understand Akihito and his pain a little better. Gradually, they started getting closer to each other. That's why after the festival was over and she encountered Izumi, she let her know that she can no longer carry out that task. But that's when Izumi proposed something else. If she doesn't want to kill him, she can save him instead by sacrificing herself. So Izumi weakened Akihito, which caused his youmu side to emerge, and then following Izumi's directions, Mirai did what she had resolved herself to do. Looks like things had gone exactly as Izumi had planned. It had been 3 months since the incident when Akihito finally wakes up. Hirumi and Mitsuki are the ones who explain how Mirai stripped him of his youmu at the cost of her life. Akihito is broken and frustrated. When he confronts Izumi about it, she confesses that it was indeed her idea. Poor guy's on his way to his apartment when he comes across Sakura, and she's also devastated and asks him about Mirai's whereabouts. Sadly, he couldn't say anything and simply walked away. Once home, he checks his phone only to find Mirai's last email. She expresses her gratitude for coming into her life and helping her accept herself. It's her final farewell before leaving to defeat Beyond the Boundary. This is where Moroku pops up on the screen yet again. He rationalizes that Beyond the Boundary is currently in a battle against Mirai in a different dimension. He uses the spear to inject energy into Beyond the Boundary and ends up creating a black sphere hanging in the sky. This creates a reaction in all other youmu who start getting absorbed by the energy influx. Meanwhile, Akihito and everyone else are summoned by someone to meet up in the literary club. It's his mother. And after the usual embarrassment is done and gone, she explains how Mirai is still alive, fighting a long, strenuous battle against Beyond the Boundary all by herself. She gives Akihito a shard of Beyond the Boundary, which fell off when he got possessed by Hollow Shadow. By coming into contact with it, he can retain some of his powers and go help Mirai in that dimension. Izumi is suddenly there, telling him not to go, but Akihito couldn't care less about the consequences at this point. So with a larger-than-life heartbeat, he runs towards the black sphere, enters it, and quickly merges with his puppet version that was there in the mirror dimension. There, the two finally reunite after 3 whole months. Mirai is not very pleased at first because this means that her sacrifice was meaningless, but when she hears him out, how he never wanted her to sacrifice herself for him, and how selfish this behavior was, Mirai begins to understand where he's coming from. At the same time, Izumi confronts Akihito's mother about what her son actually is, but she dodges the question by shifting her attention to what Moroku is up to before leaving. As for Akihito and Mirai, they now have to figure out how to defeat and subdue Beyond the Boundary. Together they push through with their abilities and somehow make their way to the core of this youmu, while Hirumi, Mitsuki, Sakura, Izumi, and that teacher Shizuku confront Moroku. But Moroku quite conveniently creates a barrier and encloses both himself and Izumi inside of it, though Hirumi manages to enter that barrier as well. He comes across another shocking revelation. Both Moroku and Izumi have youmu inside of them. This makes Izumi look even more sus. Anyway, they manage to take down Moroku, who basically just exploded. Back in the mirror world, both Akihito and Mirai are forced to come face to face with their past. Regrets, trauma, and emotions, they must overcome that darkness while inside Beyond the Boundary's core. To top it off, this struggle is visibly portrayed considering how thousands of youmu appear before them, and they have to take them all on. Just like that, Akihito pushes through and confronts Beyond the Boundary. He subdues it and reabsorbs the youmu. Though, now that Beyond the Boundary was inside him once again, the mirror world begins to disappear, and so too Mirai. She bids farewell to Akihito before finally fading away into oblivion as Akihito cries his heart out. Life goes on. He has Mirai's ring, but then one random day, it simply disappears from his hand. He quickly rushes to the rooftop, and sure enough, Mirai's back. He returns her red glasses while expressing his odd confusion, and that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.